Sasa hiyo itakuwa nini? Culture or religion?
So इससे कहा
Ah,
कौन है क्या बे
so don't raise it,
Tayo,
Baba.
હવે શાંતિ
ના
પામો તો બે live છો. Assalamu alaikum. Before we carry on with the program, I'd like to ask Brother Haider Ali Habib to recite a few verses of the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, my respected scholars, elders, brothers and sisters. Welcome to WorldCorp's first episode of Season 1, The Inner Voice. Now, I'm your host, Muhammad Nazir Khaki, and just as the name suggests, the purpose of these talk shows by the Mombasa WorldCorps is to touch on topics that are perhaps just a little bit taboo or sensitive, so to speak, and in some circles basically. And the idea is to relate to a new generation of questions and concerns that may arise due to the integration of various societies and influences that we have today. With me today, I'd like to introduce some of the most profound individuals within our community, our guest panelists. The first one is Sayyid Zishan Haider Naqvi. He is our resident alim and has been here for the past few years in Mombasa. We have Brother Muhammad Jafar as well. He is the head of the Islamic Religious Education Board in Mombasa. And he is also a lecturer, a seasoned lecturer, who has been quite active in spreading the message of Islam. Then we have Brother Nishat Karim as well. Nishat is also a lecturer in his own right. And at the same time, he is a teacher at the madrasa. And so he has quite a bit of connection with our youth, and he'll be bringing up a viewpoint from what he knows as far as the madrasa and our youth are concerned. This episode, you may have read, covers a very interesting topic, religion and culture. And while it has a whole area, a wide range of topics that can be touched upon, we've narrowed it down for you into 3 subcategories. If you take a look at the screen right now, so the first category, we've narrowed it down to the effects and enhancements cultural practices have on religion. Number 2, are we more inclined towards cultural practices rather than on religious teachings? And number 3, what extent does our religion permit us to go along with culture? Now, we know that this is a very wide and extensive subject, and we've narrowed it down to these 3 in order to stay a bit more focused. But we want you to know as well that this will continue on with further episodes down the line. So if you have any questions that are not related to what we want to discuss today, we will keep them for our future episodes as well. We have the opportunity for our audience to stay connected and engage in tonight's program. If you have any questions that you wish to talk about, to ask us, or any comments you would like to bring to our attention, we have the phone number on your screen, country code 254. Phone number is 702-100-130. That's 100-130. So if you have any questions or comments, please WhatsApp that number and we will try to get it across on this program for tonight. Now, I do not wish to take any more of your time. I want to focus on the guest panelists with us this evening, and let's get their thoughts and views. And to get the ball rolling, I want to ask our resident alim, Sayyid Zishan Haydar Naqwi. Sayyid, salamun alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sayyid, I think you need to unmute your mic. Yes.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Nizar bhai.
Now, Sayyid, I know that this is a very sensitive and interesting topic that we have here, especially for our youth. Many who may feel that culture might be outdated or even not necessary. But for the record, we want our audience to know that whatever we talk about here is not a decisive forum. It is intended to give us viewers a broad sense of understanding of the topic. Share your thoughts about this thought process the youths go through and the combination of culture and religion, especially in this century. Molandi, you heard the question? You heard the...
Yes. Yes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First and foremost, I want to present the definition of culture. Culture, it is something that has been started from the day of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, and it would remain up until the day of judgment. And that is why for culture there are a lot of definition has been mentioned by scholars, Muslim scholars and non-Muslim scholars. So let me tell you what is the culture before we start, our discussion. So culture is a set of belief and creed that is established among the human being consciously or unconsciously, that lead human being to meaningful life and certain way of life. Culture is adopted from habit, geographical aspect, race, status, and religion, etc. Culture is something that differ time to time, place to place, race to race, unlike religion. But when it comes to the religion, religion is a set of belief of heart that emerges from nature, intellectual and traditional evidence. Religious assignments were revealed from Lord on his apostle for the prosperity and security of human being in this world as well as in hereafter. So over here, now, what is the connection between culture and the religion? Of course, culture is something that is older than the religion. When religion of Islam has come, indeed, the aim of Islam and aim of religion, it is the same prosperity and security of human being for this world and hereafter. But when we say what is the connection and relation, how religion interact with the culture? If you look at the ayat of Quran, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many places, like Surah Al-Hujurat, he said, Ya ayyuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Very famous ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing all human beings, whether they belong to this part of the world or other part of the world, everywhere where their human being is found. So it means the religion of Islam, it is a universal. And we have varieties of the culture in the world and in the universe. So that is why we can say religion is something that has to interact with different culture, and Islam has capability and ability to manifest in different culture in various cultures. And likewise, we have a ayah of Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, "Qul, O my beloved messenger, tell to the people, ayyuhan nas, O people, inni rasulullahi ilaykum jami'a. I am the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you all, for all human beings, not only a particular community." So we can say Islam can interact. Now, how Islam, deal with the culture? We have three, dimensions.
Before you go ahead, if you give me permission.
Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
The way you've explained about culture and religion, the issue that comes to mind is that culture is man-made, while religion is divine. That means culture is what comes from our forefathers and has been coming on through the families.
Yeah.
While religion is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have no room for changing laws or traditions of religion.
Exactly.
Then as times change, we change our culture, we change our practices as times change. Or as, like you mentioned, geographical area changes. The same community living in America today would have a different culture in certain aspects, and here would have a different culture. And living in Asia also would have a different culture. So I think it is important for us to say that, yes, as far as divine is concerned, now the ayah of the Quran that you mentioned is a beautiful ayat. It actually defines culture, in other words, and religion. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum min shu'uban wa qaba'ila. For what reason? لِتَعَرَفُوا, so that you can be recognized. There is a distinction between each community. Today, I am a Khoja is because of my culture that I am a Khoja. Khoja is not a religion. Shia Ithna Ashari is a religion. But Khoja is not a religion. How did I come through Khoja? It came through because of my culture, like you mentioned. So now, our aim is to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are using culture to come into this world, to actively participate, but to achieve nearness to Allah, which is our main aim, that is only achieved. So these two are distinctive ideas, culture and religion. Now, Maulana,
Can I add
you are
something?
going,
here?
yes.
Okay, so I think you've defined the culture in a very broad perspective, and I would like to subdivide it into between culture and tradition. So culture is a way of life. Okay, it is as you said, her different places have got her different ways of living. So it is basically defined lifestyle. It is defined by language. It is defined by values. It is defined by norms and artifacts. So those are cultures. You know, for example, just to give a very simplistic example would be, for example, the Muslims who live in East Africa, the form of their hijab is different from the form of the hijab of women who live in the West, for example, or for those who live in the Indo-Pak region, or for those who live in the West. Okay, so the principle of religion remains the same, hijab, but the cultural way of observing hijab becomes different. Tradition is a subdivision or is a part of culture. And sometimes we tend to mix the issue of tradition, culture, and then religion as well. So tradition is basically something that we have inherited from our forefathers. So, for example, just to give you an example of a very neutral people is in the olden days, the barristers in the United Kingdom used to wear wigs, you know, and it was a tradition. Today we are in the 21st century, but they still wear the wigs. Logically, it doesn't make sense, but it's a tradition that they have been following for over many years. So likewise, our tradition could be, for example, on the day of Eid, we exchange gifts between families. It's a tradition. So just to bring this whole aspect of religion, culture, and then tradition into more perspective.
Nishat, if I can interject just a bit. From what I gather here is that we've talked about religion and culture, and religion is actually all-inclusive, but culture is not all-inclusive. It is divisive in a sense that everyone has their own culture. Some of the youths will probably have these questions, and they have asked us in the past before, that if culture is a dividing factor, but the religion is an all-inclusive factor, then why do we need culture in order, so that how are we expected to integrate with others in society in general?
Nizar bhai, let me explain how religion can be integrated with the culture. There are three aspects where religion interfere. There is one aspect we call it aqaid or usuluddin in very simple language, madrasa language. Usuluddin, it is something that that is a belief and that belong to our creed and aqidah. And when when this aspect of religion would come, and when it comes to the culture, so what religion or what Islam does, Islam transform all the belief of the culture, and Islam impose its belief. Like, for example, Tawheed. For example, in our culture, if the aspect or concept of Tawheed is different from the concept of Islam, of course, we have to, wind up our cultural belief and accept the belief of, Islam. And there are 5, Usuluddin, Tawheed, Adl, Nabuwat, Imamat, and Qiyamat. So in the first aspect, in Usuluddin, Islam does not accept any, concept of the culture over here. And second, aspect of the Islam, it is Furu'uddin, like Salat and fasting and, all those Furu'. Namaz and fasting, Hajj, Zakat, Khums, Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar, and all our rituals and traditions. So when it comes to the Furu'uddin, also Islam does not accept any Furu'uddin. For example, Islam has presented namaz. Now, our culture, if it says, for example, I want to pray my salat in this way, or I want to pray my salat, for example, in different direction of the Qibla. So over here in ritual and tradition that Islam has given us, Islam does not accept, anything from the culture. But the remaining is third thing, way of life. And that is more important, the path of life. Over here, Islam, it gives space to culture to play its role. And Islam does not transform, the way of life of the culture completely. And Islam, looks at the way of life and modify it, whether, the principles of Islam are not contradicting with the principles of the culture. I hope you got it, inshallah.
I think we're doing well so far. Mohammed Uncle, you want to add something?
Yes. Now, culture is a part we are born with. Okay, we cannot do away with it. The way I am hearing right now in Western countries, those people who are living alone, they don't have a culture, neither do they have religion. Today they are lost. The cases of depression, cases of committing suicide, cases of losing hope, because culture creates an attachment to your community. The roots, I would call it. Let's call a tree which has roots and which gives apples. But I put a tree and I just go and hang apples. What will happen? The tree will fall because there are no roots in it. If we expect for him, it is important for him to know his culture, so then he will understand his religion. Now, for example, I was just taking an example of the issue where once Marhum Mullah Asghar had mentioned that in Mombasa, there was a time after Subuh prayers, people used to be invited for breakfast to some mu'min's house. So what used to happen? They used to go. So one day, a mu'min like me, he said, Bayo, today the breakfast is breakfast is very nice, but you have to come. So people came in great multitude. They said, before I give you the breakfast, you have to do 140,000 Amman Yujibu. You have to recite 140,000 times Amman Yujibu. So Mullah said, your nazar, you should complete it. Why are you making us complete it? The aspect of nazar, if you go and see in culture, it is there. In cultural practices, they do say, or they do it in this way, that I will do the following things. Yes, you do nazar, but you leave your hopes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just Maulana has said, Tawheed is important. The difference between culture and religion would come in the aspect of Tawheed, where it would be difficult, but it will be understandable. Why are we believing in Tawheed? It is easier with a person with culture than a person without culture. So culture is an remove it, we will not understand. But the same culture in some cases causes hindrances in religion. So they are both parts of culture. But I feel that
sorry, I'm cutting you off, Brother Muhammad. I want to welcome Nishad back. I think we lost him for a few seconds.
Yeah, sorry, I lost some internet connection.
No problem. Let's move on to the second aspect of this discussion for tonight. And this is something that's definite. Our youth have a lot of questions on. We get asked that a lot of times. Are we more inclined towards cultural practices in our centers or in our masjids, imam baras, rather than on religious teachings? I mean, this is a question I'm sure, Nishat, you've heard it in the madrasa many times. What are your thoughts on explaining this?
Okay, so you see, it is a very fine balance that we have between cultural practices and religious practices. So yes, we do observe religious practices in the mosques, but they are intertwined with how the culture dominates certain things. And this is where sometimes we lose the youths over there, because they feel that there is an imbalance.
A blurry line between the two.
Yes, absolutely. So they feel there is an imbalance, and then it causes a kind of a confusion. So just to give you an example, we do many amals, for example, during the years, and one which comes to mind, for example, is the Laylatul Ragaib amals, okay, which are pretty prolonged. And yes, it is maybe a religiously part of the religion and the recommended act, etc. However, some youths feel disconnected from that, because the examples at the site is like we have to recite long namaz, long surahs, we can't maintain concentration. So sometimes, they get this notion that this is a cultural thing, because if Islam was so difficult that I cannot maintain concentration, then why am I doing this particular act? So they are not seeing a connection between what they are doing and between what they are supposed to do. See, that connection is missing.
Maulana sir?
Actually, when it comes to the mosque program, literally, I do not find any cultural aspect. However, it is unless it is very less cultural aspect especially in the mosque or imam bar. For example, the example that Nishad Bhai, mashallah, is given, Laylatul Ragaib. Of course, when we look at the religious aspect from the religious point of view, so Amal of Laylatul Ragaib or night of 27th night of Ramadan, of course, they are quite lengthy. But Amal, of course, they are related to the religion, not to the culture, number one. And number two, of course, when it is lengthy, definitely it is difficult for people to maintain their focus, maintain their attention. It is quite difficult. Over here, there is a differences of view. You may find many people they keen or they like to have sitting in the mosque for a long time and connect themselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it comes to the other people like youth, of course, when it comes to youth, youth cannot tolerate this much. So over here, Islamically, if they are not attending these amal, they are not committing a sin. Why? Because it is something that is recommended and mustahab. Huh? So over here, we should not have pain in our heart or within ourselves why our youth are not coming to mosque and sitting as long as we are sitting over there. But of course, when it comes to the wajib salat, then we have to have this pain and we must be concerned about it. And yes, there are cultural things, those goes, in our centers or in our community that we can consider.
Maulana, I think the question the youths normally have is that the pressure by the parents, now I would call it now is the cultural pressure, towards such sunnahat is much more than towards the wajibat.
Ahsan.
Some parents would not force the child to go for namaz every day, for Jamaat namaz,
Yes.
because the parent is not doing it himself. But for
Yes.
Laylatul Raghaib, he will force the children to fast and to do the amal.
Yes.
I think the question here is that the importance given to the amal that are not wajib, that is the cultural practice, that those that are important are left out.
Yeah.
Yes, these are also very good, are very beneficial.
So over here, Nishad Bhai is very correct. We can say that it become like a norm or a culture within our community that we give priority to mustahabbat rather than giving priority to the wajibat. Of course, over here, our community, and we all have to understand this thing, that wajibat are more important than the mustahabbat, and we should differentiate what is wajib and what is mustahab.
And if I may add something, you see, sometimes when we talk about the wajibats, straight away the things which come to mind is, for example, namaz, fasting, etc. What we tend to miss out are the bigger things, which are issues of morality, for example, issues of modesty, being humble, being sincere, being respectful. So when we talk about the wajibats also, we need to be very specific and not just restrict them to what we do as physical actions, but also things that we practice as being human as well. So those are important things, because these are the things that are being missed out totally. And then we have a situation where people are in total confusion. They don't know which way to go, and because they get mixed signals from different places.
No, you have touched a topic that is what I wanted to come to much earlier. You know why this is happening? Because culturally we are not strong. If we take our youth and ask them what is our culture, one of the most important part of any culture is the language. The language is missing. So our touch with our culture is missing. If you look at the good habits, speaking of truth, justice, being humble, being not getting angry on small items, being obedient to parents, being respectful to elders, being guiding to youngsters, all these are cultural practices. They have been given more importance in religion, but they are cultural practices. Just an example, in India, for example, Maulana, you know better, the people of Lucknow, the Urdu that they speak, their culture is really sweet. If you go and visit them, you would like living with them. You don't want to come out of there because of the culture that they have. Every culture is very good. Every culture does good only, but they have changed over time. So one of the important components that we have left out, I feel, is our language. And our Mujtahid himself is insisting that please take care of your language. What is the reason? Because of the language, we will touch our culture and Islam will become easier to follow.
If I can, I just want to throw a wrench in this whole conversation we're having. And we spoke about it before, Nishad. when we speak of culture, I think there's a lot of lines that we can't draw between myth, tradition, and culture. Okay, and I know it's just slightly off topic, but because it's related to what people think about culture, and some of these are not really culture, they're just traditions or myths. So how can we address such things and make it clear for our audience, our viewers, that there is a difference between these three?
So if I can talk of the myths, because the myths are many, and I think the myths confuse everybody. So I mean, for example, just to highlight a few, the myth that exists is that, for instance, you can not leave if you have been in hospital, so do not get discharged on a Saturday, because it is you might end up coming back. Okay, there's nothing Islamically here. It's just a myth. All days belong to Allah. So how can I get a discharge on Saturday and come back when a fellow, maybe a non-Muslim, gets discharged on Saturday and doesn't come back? You know, it doesn't make sense. For example, having certain foods on certain days, or wearing new clothes on certain days, or clipping nails at a particular time of the day. You know, these are all myths that do not exist with the religion, and these totally confuse the youth. And what happens at the end of the day, we start discussing them and get so much into these things and trying to find out whether it's real, not real, factual, not factual, and we miss out the bigger essence and the bigger picture of what religion is supposed to take us to.
Maulana Saib, do you think that what Nishad just mentioned about myths, and then we go back to culture again?
Yeah.
Do you think some people assume or incorporate these myths as part of the culture then, just in general?
Yeah. You know, if you look at the myths or superstition deeply, so you find that, these myths do not even belong to culture as well as our, religion. Why? Most of, values of our culture based on logic. This is very important. And of course, our mazhab and our religion also based on the, logic and traditional that we have received from Rasulullah through, Quran and his ahadith. But this myth and superstitions are something that are the creation of, our imagination, that are baseless. Here we have to understand. So both madhab and culture do not accept the myths and superstition. And superstitions and myths are the product of our ignorance. Once we have proper culture along with our religion, I'm telling you, you cannot fall into prey of myth and superstitions.
I have a comment from one of our viewers, Brother Muhammad. Maybe you can add to it. And he says that culture keeps the community together. This unity helps in promoting religious beliefs. And I really like that sentence, actually. He also adds that any culture that is un-Islamic should be thrown out of the window. What are your thoughts on this?
Like I mentioned, there are some cultural practices that Islam does not allow. A simple example is that we consider ourselves as superior to another community. That is a cultural practice. For example, I consider myself more superior than a different colored person, although he's a mu'min. Religion does not make that difference. It says we are all equal in the eyes of Allah. So we should give equal respect to each one and every one of us. My question is that in our community, to remove that thought, which is against religion, is a cultural belief that we are superior to others, is a cultural practice. Also, it's not a belief, it's a cultural practice that we think ourselves to be superior. Imam alayhi salam has taught us, and which is very difficult to perform, that many imams, we have seen incidences where they used to have their main meal with all their workers, with all their staff, whatever the color. Because of Iman, Imam used to sit. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he used to sit with the people who are poor. Miskinun jalisa ma'al miskina. Meaning what? That there is no race, there is no color, there is no wealth status, but Iman. So this is one of the examples that I have. Very true. We should remove those practices that are cultural but have no place in religion. Very important.
I want to remind our audience, those who are viewing and tuned in, if you have any questions, please make sure, or any comments, please make sure you message us, 254-702-100-130. Also, let us know where you're from. We won't give out your name, but it'll be nice to know where you are messaging us from. Nishad, anything to add to what Brother Muhammad just spoke about?
Yes, so Brother Muhammad just talked about one aspect of the culture where we feel superior to another race. Within the same culture, within the same race, so we are within the same race. Now, we're not in a different race. Within the same race, culturally, we are attuned. Our mindset is programmed to being a male-dominant society, a male supreme society, whereas, you know, and women are considered as inferior. Whereas Islam gives women the equal rights. They give them its position in society. Again, culturally, we are inclined to one way, but Islam teaches us a different practice. Adding one more point to what I've just said, culturally, a woman cannot propose to a man because it's culture. Islam is right opposite. In fact, when a nikah is being recited, it is the woman who is proposing to the man. But culturally, if a single woman wants to propose to a single man, hula baloo, you know, we'll have an issue because we're culturally programmed like that. So these are some of the things that we need to draw a balance and say these are the cultural practices that have no value within religion.
But I think we should also respect the fact that many cultural practices that were there in the past have come out. Yes, there are many to be removed, but also there is a progress. It's not that we have been stagnant. Over time, when people have realized, gained more knowledge, many cultural practices are on the way out. Like Nishad Bhai said, we still have a long way ahead.
Maulana Sahib, there's a question over here. If some cultural practices deviate us from the religious thought, for some, not everyone, for some people, should we do away with these practices entirely, or should we just resort to educating them, the few who might consider wrongly?
Nithar bhai, can you repeat your question because the voice was cut?
Okay, I'll just paraphrase it in short. So someone is asking if there are some cultural practices we have in the masjid or in our Islamic centers, and for a few people, it deviates their thoughts. It does not take them towards religion, but like, I don't want to go too much in details. I have an example in my mind, but should we educate them or should we just do away with them for these very few who are actually inclined not to lean towards religion because of these practices?
Yeah, over here, first of all, we have look at that particular, things. Does it really, diverting their mind or diverting their thought or not? If it is true that it is diverting your mind from the real concept of Islam, of course, then we have to remove it. This is the, very logical thing.
But for only a few, not for the majority.
Yeah, if it is only for few people, of course, then we have to educate them.
But isn't anything that you do culturally, ultimately the purpose has to have, you are supposed to reach a particular goal. So a culture is a stepping stone to take you to a higher purpose. And if it is not taking you to a higher purpose, does it have its value?
I have a comment here, Brother Nishad, and maybe you want to elaborate on it because it might have been misconstrued. Interesting discussion, just a quick comment. Clipping of nails on certain time and certain days are more blessed, and all these are mentioned in the Sunnah of our Prophet and Aima. So do you want to elaborate on that little clip that you had talked about?
Well, you see, again, let's be logical. Let's be logical. If my nails are long, do I wait for a certain day to cut my nails? Or do I cut them because there is a need that I need to cut them and maintain hygiene? So when certain things do not logically apply to certain principles, then there is a big question mark, and people question these things.
I think can I add something on here?
Yes.
My nails are long, but my father or my mother will tell me, no, you're not going to cut it until Friday. Okay. Religion does not disallow you to cut the nails when you have a problem, right? They are long, they are causing an injury, or for wudu also you're having a problem, as an example. Yes, there are traditions of cutting the nails at certain times and certain days, but does not mean that it is haram to cut nails at other times. So, the concept here is that you should suffer till the right time to cut nails. While Islam is different. Islam is here to make life easier. When you have a problem, cut it. But if you can plan your day or your week properly, that you have that particular time and take advantage of it, well and good, no problem. But does not disallow. I think that is where where the confusion is.
I have a very, sorry, Maulana Sahib, please go ahead. Then I'll ask the question later.
I want to add only half a minute comments over here. About the nail cutting, when it comes to culture, I don't know whether it is there in the culture or not. But when it comes to the religion, we have some traditions. Especially, you can look at the Hilyatul Muttaqeen. It is a book written by Allam al-Majlisi. So in Hilyatul Muttaqeen, you find some riwayat. And those says you have to cut your nails, shave means proper your beard, and have haircut on Wednesday, and some other riwayat says on like let's say this Friday. So there are certain days, but Islam has put all certain days for cutting nails and haircut and all that, in order to instill the culture, instill the thought of cleanliness. But as Muhammad Bhai has said, that if, or Nishat Bhai has said, our nail is very long. So you can, for example, you forgot cutting on Wednesday or Friday, and then your nail get longer. So in this case, of course, you can cut any day. Islam does not prohibit. Islam does not, disapprove it. You can cut any day. But recommendation, for example, you are coming for the Salatul Jum'ah, Friday namaz. So over here, if you cut your nails, so you find yourself presentable and you find yourself clean, and that is, accepted, or that is appreciated by, your neighbor mu'minin, or the fellows, those are going to sit next to you in namaz Jum'ah. You are having clean vessels.
Okay, now if I can ask this question, I find it quite interesting. There are 3 or 4 questions which I want to address. But let me just ask you this one. Historically, this is from someone in Mombasa. Historically, we see the earliest Muslims, like Bilal from Abyssinia, who had their own culture, and Salman al-Muhammadi, a Persian, who had his own diverse culture as well, both different from prevalent Arabian culture. Do we see these companions showing signs of their cultural predispositions in historical analysis? If so, where? If not, now, if they haven't shown their cultural backgrounds, is it necessary to maintain a culture that eventually disembodies us from the greater fraternity of Shiaism? Was that question clear for everyone?
Can you paraphrase it?
Yes. So the gentleman gives 2 examples, one of Salman al-Muhammadi and one of Bilal, both from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. And he says that from what we know, they have not shown their cultural backgrounds when they became Muslim, so to speak, when they converted. So what about us? Is it necessary that we have to maintain our cultural backgrounds when these 2 companions we don't think that they did from history?
Very good question. So should I start, or Muhammad Bhai or
Bismillah.
Okay. When we look at the Salman al-Muhammadi and Bilal, of course, when they accepted Islam, they were living in culture of Arab. And we have a hadith, and even our logic, it says, إِذَا حَلَّلْتُمْ بِبَلْدَةٍ فَعَاشِرُوا بِأَدَابِهَا. When you enter in a city or in a town, you know, it is a hadith of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam. When you enter in a house or in a town or in a city or in a country, what you have to do, you should follow the etiquette of that city. You should follow the etiquette of that land. What does it mean? For example, in Pakistan, people normally they wear shalwar and kameez. It is their culture. And somebody comes, if a Pakistani would come here to the land of Africa, here the dress is different from the dress of Pakistan. So if he wears the dress of there in here, so it would look like very odd. So what Islam told us, that wherever you are living, you should follow the etiquette of that land. So because Salman al-Muhammadi and Bilal, both of them, they were living in the land of Arab. So, and they were following their culture. This is number one. Number two, we have, who said that the Salman did not show his culture, and who said that the Bilal did not show his culture. Of course, Salman had shown his culture. For example, at the time of Khandaq. So Salman, he comes to Rasulullah, when Kuffar and Mushrikeen at the Battle of Khandaq wanted to attack on Muslims in Medina. So Salman al-Muhammadi, he comes to Rasulullah, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have seen in my culture in Iran, that at the time of attack, we used to dig the ditch around the, around our town or around our village or city. So why don't we do? So this culture was beautiful in the eyes of Rasulullah. Rasulullah has implemented it in Medina. So here we can say it is not necessary to leave our culture as long as we are, living and we are, our culture is not contradicting with the principles of the Islam.
Brother Muhammad, do you have anything to add to that? Or should I ask another question?
One thing, that culture is very important. Doing away with our culture leads to us even losing faith. However, as our faith increases, Islam becomes our culture. I think it's simple.
Okay, let me move on to the next question. I want to remind our viewers that if we don't manage to ask your question on this forum, we will have other similar talk shows that will also encompass the same topic and subject as we go along. This one is quite interesting, but I also feel that maybe we should have had somebody else on the forum here for this one. It is understood that culture comes within religion and cannot go against religion. Why is it that a lot of people have started adopting the Western culture, especially in aspects such as hijab for the women? And this is a question from someone in the UK. Why is it that even the girls in East Africa who do not have the restriction of wearing the perfect hijab still choose to adopt a very Western culture in their dressing? How can this be changed to make the hijab of the youth like that of Hazrat Zahra? I know this is a very, very sensitive question. So do you feel like answering it today or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it is very normal and common for the human being when he is impressed with anything, any country, with any entity, he observes his etiquette and his values. For example, when I am attached, when I am impressed with a particular teacher, what would happen? I have seen in myself. If I'm attached with a particular teacher, so I start observing all his styles and all his things, how he sit, how he speak, and how he talk, and how he, deal with the people. So because I'm impressed with him. So the issue is why we are observing the Western culture, because we are impressed by them and we like them. So that is why, we observe their etiquette and we observe their culture. And when it comes to the Islam, so our teachings, our gain that we achieved from Islam, it is very limited. And in fact, if you go in deep of your heart, it is, I'm not targeting any person, it is for all, including me and my family as well. So in fact, if we look at ourselves, so we are not that much impressed with the religion, and it is because of lack of knowledge. It is because of lack of understanding. So here, we can differentiate in this way, because we are impressed with the West more than we are impressed with, our religion.
Well, you see, the concept of hijab is a very different concept from one person to a different person. When you're observing hijab, maybe in the West, it is because of the setting that is there, and you cannot do any other way. When people from here adapt to that practices over there, is because maybe of different reasons. So for example, if in East Africa, the climatic conditions are very hot sometimes, and they become hot. So there could be a possibility then people would tend to adopt a different set of hijab that suits that environment at that particular time. But ultimately, what is their intention? The intention is to wear hijab. The intention is to cover. And I think that ultimately overrides everything else.
Mohammed Uncle, do you want to, sorry, Brother Mohammed, do you want to add anything to it?
Maulana Sahib and Nishad Bhai have really put it nicely. My point was only one. It is because of ignorance, lack of knowledge, that people make changes in their lives. If Islam was taught properly, the concept of hijab was taught, implemented here, not forced on the girls, to make a lot of difference. But as per the requirement of hijab, if the wajibat is met, what is the harm in following other cultures? Ahsan.
So we are nearly at the end of our time, but I think maybe we can just extend it by a few minutes if it's okay with our speakers, our guest speakers. Is it okay? Just a few more minutes. Okay.
Thumbs up.
All right. One question here from one of our brothers in Mombasa. Pregnant women who cannot go to Qabristan or see a dead body, or during an eclipse, pregnant women can't hold certain items. Is this religion, culture, or is it just a myth?
Actually, if you look at the Sharia, it does not prohibit or disapprove to go to Qabristan in the state of while you are carrying the child in the womb.
Okay, so that answers it. Brother Mohammed, did you want to add anything? No? Okay. There's this one question now that we've talked about culture so much and religion, we've also integrated the two. There's one question that I want to bring about, which one of our youth has asked from the UK. And he says, how can we instill these values in our youth? Or how can the youth strive towards where we get to the stage of being impressed by religion in order to emulate those values set by the Ahlul Bayt? So I think this question is really referring to the fact that our mindset is not perhaps very clear between the line of culture and religion. So how do we get our youth to be more in tune with the mindset of the Ahlul Bayt?
Actually,
did everything pause? Okay.
Just trying to
digest. Okay.
Digest and yeah.
So who will be the first one to answer that or share their thoughts?
Maybe can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes. How do we get our youth more in tune with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt rather than cultural teachings? I paraphrase it, and I think that's the question.
Maybe, okay, if I can start. It may not be the answer, but these are just thoughts. Maybe the way we practice the religion causes a lot of confusion in people's minds. And when they don't see a clarity in the way religion is being practiced, when they see duplicity in standards, so you do one thing, you say something, you do something else. You know, for example, you preach equality, but in reality you practice segregation. For example, in the issue of racism, for example. So you say we're all equal, but when they come to the mosque, you know, you are here and I'm here. So when especially when the youths, when they see duplicity in the way we practice things, that is the first step when they are going to look for something that is going to appeal to them, because this is definitely not appealing to them, and they are now confused. That is one point. The second point is okay. It was there in my mind. I've just lost it. But maybe if it does come, then I will come back to it. But maybe my fellow panelists can chip in for the time being, whilst I think of the second point that came to mind.
Zishan, I have a question for you very shortly. So before I go to your question for you, Brother Muhammad, do you want to add anything to this?
Yes, my feeling is that Iman, the usul ad-din, has to be very strong to understand and to perform the furu. We must have enough knowledge, and not just the way of Allah ek panjatan panch imam bar, and knowing the names of the imams and things like that. It is very important to really believe in what we really are. If our tawheed, adalat, nabuwat, imamat, qiyamat, if our belief will be strong, and that is only based on knowledge. If we will be given that knowledge and we will have that strength, automatically other people not performing or other people doing other acts will have no effect on our performance. Youth require a guidance. And like Nishad Bhai said, they look and do not hear. They don't listen. They look at what you do. It is true. But when we teach them the real Islam, what it is, I'm sure that can make a lot of difference.
Okay, I think we've covered that pretty well. Maulana Saib, and of course, Brother Muhammad and Nishad, if you want to add into this as well. There's one question here. Salam's one of our brothers from Nairobi. I'm very curious about pouring water on graves. Is there any benefit from an Islamic perspective, or is it just a tradition that we are doing, pouring water on graves?
Yes, actually, we have some riwayat. Those says sprinkling water on the grave, it is recommended, but for a certain time, not for all the time when you are going to visit the graveyard and you pour the water on the grave.
Okay. It's now 10 o'clock. And if we take one more question, if that's okay with you, before we wrap it up. Just give me a second here while I get to the question. So when we believe, this is from somebody in the United Kingdom, when we believe our culture is superior, we tend to build a wall around it to try and preserve it. Don't you think that the lack of racial inclusivity in our community highlights this? And I think Nishad, Brother Nishad, you touched upon this briefly in the previous comment that you made, but maybe you want to expound on it because the question has been asked.
Okay, so can you just repeat the question again, please?
Yes, when we believe our culture is superior, we tend to build a wall around it to try and preserve it. Brother Muhammad, you spoke about superiority as well. Don't you think that the lack of racial inclusivity in our community highlights this? And I think it might be referring to the fact of our cultural that is different from others in our centers.
That is definitely a case, because if we were to allow okay, we do allow people to visit our centers. We do allow them to integrate with us. I think with time we have evolved a lot. I mean, I remember a time when I was a teenager, and having a black person lead Salah would be a big issue, and they actually became a big issue. But today we have evolved. So with time, as we evolve with time, where we become more aware of things, where when we do get a lot more knowledge, that inclusivity does come in. And I think generally we have allowed ourselves to open up and to allow people from different races to be part of our programs and part of our centers, especially where we have seen in East Africa generally. Yes.
Okay. Now I would I'm sorry, there's some of these questions are really interesting. My question is, this is from somebody in Nairobi. How come many Muslims marry within the family? Is it a cultural practice, or does Islam encourage it? Brother Muhammad, we haven't heard from you in a while, so maybe you could talk to us about that.
I remember during one of our discussions, they would say we want to preserve the wealth within the family, so they would always marry within the family. But religiously it is allowed, and yes, I think it is a cultural practice. And even if you look at the lives of our imams, they have also married within the family. So it is not that it is not allowed, it is allowed. However, marrying outside also is not prohibited. So I don't see the need of this question, because whether you marry within or you marry outside the family, Islam allows it. So whether it's cultural, it's not a bad practice. Neither it is, I don't know about the medical issue. You have to be careful nowadays that we are more aware. But otherwise, I think
what the question is,
preserve the wealth.
I think what the question is also trying to lead is it this cultural practice making it a taboo, for example, you know? So Islamically it's okay, but if today a person from within a community was to marry outside, you know, it is straight away a stigmatized kind of a thing.
No, is it marrying outside the community, or is it marrying in the community but outside the family? We are talking about cousin marriages.
No,
isn't it?
The question is, how come many Muslims marry in the family? So yes, I think referring to cousins, second, third cousins, but also keep in mind that this question is perhaps linking to the Western ideology that marrying cousins is something that's very, as Nishad pointed out, very taboo. Yes. So it's sort of getting ingrained in our community that you shouldn't.
Right.
Okay.
About the marriage, if you look at the Islam, so we have a very common criteria, and that is al-mu'minu kufu al-mu'mina, that a mu'min is compatible for a mu'mina, and mu'mina is compatible for the mu'min. So whether it is family, cousins, or others. And of course, there are some conditions like consent from both sides. Otherwise, in Islam, we do not find anything that prohibit or disapprove marrying within the family or within, in between the cousins. It is all
okay. Thank you to our guest speakers. It's been a great session, I think, a great first session, first episode. Are there any final words you want to part with, or do we end the program for tonight?
So I would like to say, and that was the second point that I was trying to remember the earlier time, is that you see, there are quite a few verses in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we want to make it easy for you, not difficult. Yeah. When it comes to fasting, when it comes to jihad, it is always about making it easy, making it easy. So Islam generally doesn't want to make our practice very difficult. Islam wants to make it very easy for us. It is us who, because putting in our culture, our tradition, our myths, and making a kitchu out of all of it, make it very confusing for people to digest and understand. Islam is very simple to understand. But so if we were able to sieve out certain of these things which are causing this kind of a confusion, then everyone would be able to have a role model. They'll be able to practice it. They don't have to go outside to look for other role models, and everything would be well and good.
Brother Muhammad, do you want to add something to that?
I just wanted to say Ahsant, beautifully put. Ahsant.
It was very well put, yes. Maulana Sahib, anything to close up with?
Thank you so much, Nizar Bhai, for giving us this privilege to be one of the panelists of this program. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our tawfiqat, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let all of us benefit from this program. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
I would request.
Thank you, everyone. And we now call it. Sorry, Muhammad.
I would request that this thing has brought in the community together. So let us remember our elders with one Surah Fatiha, inshallah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin.
We're just going to end the screen right now, but for those who have tuned in, we have the next episode, inshallah, in 2 weeks on the 25th of July. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.